Scene one, take one. Action.
This is another segment of the Bronco News.
Good morning, everybody. I am your host, Molly Sleeman, and this is my co-host, Evan Smith.
Thank you for the introduction, Molly. Today, on this special segment of the Bronco News, we are learning about the media you see and consume in the hopes that you can control the media instead of it controlling you.
For this 30-minute segment, my colleagues and I will discuss key theories within media, the ways that media tries to affect our views, how we use social media, and how publishers carefully choose how to present media and information to their viewers. You know what's ironic, Evan?
What is that, Molly?
We are a form of mass media, and it's said that there are 4 main ways that mass media tries to influence our lives.
So you're saying we are trying to influence the audience right now?
That's right, Evan. and we'll hand it over to Grace Obert and Ryan Olson to talk about these 4 main ways.
Thanks, Molly. Firstly, mass media influence their audiences by providing gratification. According to the uses and gratification theory, we choose to consume media that satisfies the emotions we are either currently experiencing or that we want to experience.
So I was experiencing gratification theory when I chose to watch a romantic comedy when I was lonely, or when I chose to watch an action movie when I was bored, or when I watched a comedy after the Boise State lost to BYU.
That's right. According to the gratification theory on page 212 of the textbook, we use mass media to fulfill our needs and desires.
Secondly, there is the theory of agenda setting. Agenda setting occurs when the mass media selects certain ideas or perspectives to present to the consumers, while downplaying ideas that they don't want consumers to focus on. For example, during the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, almost every single radio station, television program, podcast, and news station pushed the agenda of getting the COVID-19 vaccine. News programs were constantly reporting when vaccines would be available, where the vaccines could be received, and they pushed the idea of how effective they could be.
So, who sets the agenda?
Agenda setting is done by gatekeepers. Gatekeepers are the individuals or groups that decide what events and issues are reported on.
In addition, mass media also cultivates worldviews. For example, television may promote a worldview that is inaccurate, but its consumers will believe that it reflects real life simply because it's on TV. Like when the news media only reports the negative side of stories and makes the world seem a lot more violent than it actually is.
That's right, because violence is news. Finally, mass media influences their audiences by exercising ideological influence. Ideological influence means that the individuals who have the most power often have the most control over media. We often see white and middle class people portrayed as powerful and successful in the media, while minorities and people of lower class portrayed as having less power and being less successful. This is ideological influence.
Hold on a minute. We're getting a report that a student who goes by the name of Tatum has a deep concern regarding mass media.
Hey there, guys. I really just wanted to make sure you covered media hegemony. Media hegemony is basically the idea that mass media asserts dominance over consumers, and we as consumers give consent to this dominance.
Could you maybe give an example?
Of course, one example of media hegemony is when Billie Eilish became a popular singer. She gained lots of followers on Instagram. Her influence allowed her to express her style of baggy clothes, which influenced a lot of her followers to mimic the style. Her followers were giving consent to the influence she was asserting on them.
Evan, you looked a bit confused there for a minute. You good now?
Yeah, I understand now.
Anyways, well, thank you for the informative recap of those theories. We will now be moving on to the ways that media tries to affect our views.
There are many ways the media can affect us. We all know that when someone starts a trend on social media and people post about that trend. Well, that's just one example of how media influences our decisions. Now moving on back in the field, we'll have Grace and Ryan explain this in more detail.
Because mass and social media pervade our lives, we need to be responsible and thoughtful about how we use them and how they use us. This requires us to develop media literacy. Media literacy is the ability to understand the influence of mass media and to access, analyze, evaluate, and create media in a variety of forms. To demonstrate how you can practice effective media literacy, Ryan and I are going to show you how to analyze one story from multiple sources in order to identify the key factors of weeding out the right information.
Thank you, Grace. First of all, understanding how the media manipulates us is the first step in media literacy. When we consume media, we don't want to just take in everything like unthinking sponges, waiting to be fed. We want to think about what we are watching and try to see how we can identify how it affects us.
We are actively judging what the media puts in front of us and judging whether or not it runs concurrent with our beliefs and values. Usually, the media takes this into account and pushes out content that they believe their viewers will agree with. Once an audience is achieved and found, the publishers will push out content for that specific audience. This is often to the detriment of the consumers because they will continue to consume the same perspectives and attitudes all the time. This can cause beliefs about the world not based on fact and only on other people's opinions.
In order to completely understand stories and events that the media is pushing out, engaging in other perspectives will help you understand the picture as a whole, instead of just a one-sided story.
This is present in stories that the media reports on today. For example, on the most recent reports of President Joe Biden's approval ratings, there are many different answers from a variety of sources. Ryan has the facts on that.
Thank you, Grace. We analyzed this data by the right-wing news source called the Daily Wire. In an article published October 10th, 2022 by Joseph Curl, it is evident that he only expects consumers of the same political party to be on this website. This is evident by the advertisement that pops up when you first enter the article, showing an elegant picture of former President Donald Trump, advertising for a TV show called My Dinner with Trump. Continuing on, the article gives multiple percentages about COVID-19 and the current state of our economy. And these percentages were from inaccurately cited polls.
Wait, Ryan, how are these percentages conveyed to the audience?
Good question, Molly. All of the statistics were conveyed in a negative manner. The media used words like Biden's approval ratings are in the dumper and Democrats are all over the place to paint a negative picture of both President Biden and the Democratic Party. Consumers are just supposed to take the percentages given to them and not think critically about them. This is because they are hearing exactly what they want to hear about the opposing party.
But wait, what does the opposing view give us with the same information?
Funny you should say that, because in an article published from CNN on October 12, 2022 by Ariel Edwards-Levy, essentially the same statistics were presented. However, these statistics were brought on with a more encouraging manner, and phrases like, Biden's overall job approval rating has recovered modestly, and the public's short-term outlook is somewhat more positive. The article is trying to look more positively at these statistics. For context, CNN is a more left-leaning source. This is evident by the nicer pictures of President Biden in office compared to the comical photos presented of President Biden in the Daily Wire.
Thank you for having all of the information on those sources, Ryan. As you can see, looking at both sides of the same story, for example, Biden's approval ratings, can show you dramatically different kinds of stories on the same information. This is how we as consumers can use media literacy to our advantage in seeking what the true information is on an issue.
Wait back up a minute. We can clearly see that comparing sources of different perspectives can help us identify the true facts of a story. But how can we identify manipulation? Things like agenda setting, gatekeeping, etc.
Good question, Evan. We can identify these things by looking at the structure of the media and the language used. The structure of the report or article can tell you right away if the media is trying to manipulate you. Take a look at the hook. Is it trying to steer you in a direction? Does the hook put you in a critical or sympathetic mindset about a person or event? Powerful language or persuasive words in the hook can also tell you if the article or report is attempting to be manipulative. For example, take a look at the language used in the hook of the Daily Wire article about Biden's approval ratings. With less than a month to go until the midterm elections, President Joe Biden's approval ratings are in the dumper. Now, a new poll shows just how bad things really are. This hook, compared to the hook of an article published from The Hill on October 8th of 2022 by Jared Gans, is quite different. The Hill article, although still using negative language, is far less critical than the Daily Wire. President Biden's approval ratings slipped to 39% according to a new poll, as his party seeks to hold on to power in Congress in Tuesday's midterm elections. This language is far less manipulative and more informative. For reference, The Hill tends to be a middle-standing news source. This is evident by the numerous headlines of stories that show nice pictures of both sides of the political lines.
Wait, Grace, the hook can't be the only thing that we can use to identify manipulation, right?
Yes, Evan. There are other ways in which we as consumers can identify manipulation. Another main way is looking at the claims made by the reports. Are broad claims given without facts to back them up? Are the claims themselves the facts, with mere opinion as reasoning? These are all crucial factors we can use to identify if a source is trying to manipulate us. Looking at an article published by BBC on October 25th of 2022 by Anthony Zurcher, the information given is not supported by any evidence. For example, a claim is given. Inflation rose to levels not seen since the early 1980s, driven by fast economic growth out of the pandemic, supply chain disruptions, and rising fuel costs. This is the only information given about the claim. There is no evidence to compare the inflation levels or supply chain disruptions. It is simply an opinion we are spoon-fed and expected to believe. On the other hand, looking at the CNN article once more, the author claims that optimism is mostly driven by Democrats, 63% of whom expect economic conditions to improve by that level by next year. The claim that Democrats are optimistic is backed up by a statistic from a poll cited earlier in the article.
Wait, which way does BBC lean again?
BBC is usually more middle standing, similar to The Hill.
So, even articles that look at both sides of a story can try to manipulate their audience?
Exactly right. Just because a source is information based on one aspect, such as a hook, doesn't mean it can't be biased or manipulative in another way, such as in the claims it gives. This is why it's important to thoroughly analyze an article and question all the information it's given you. This leads us to one of the key aspects of media literacy, right, Ryan?
Exactly right, Grace. In order to practice the most effective media literacy, we can't be the unthinking sponges that the media wants us to be. We have to critically analyze all of the words and evidence, or lack thereof, listed in the article.
Thank you, Grace and Ryan, for your thorough analysis of these different articles and opening our eyes to how the media manipulates us. However, mass media isn't the only thing we have to watch out for in terms of manipulation. Social media can be just as influential. Once again, on the line I have with me Tatum Tanner, an honors student here at Boise State. Good morning, Tatum.
Good morning, Evan.
Well, I think our audience has a good understanding of what social media is. However, defining the difference between mass and social media might be a gray space for others. Is there no way you could explain for our viewers the key differences between these two?
There is a way. First, on the broad definition of mass media are channels of mass communication like TV, radio, newspapers, and articles. Mass media and social media are very similar in the way that they communicate to society. However, the key difference between them is digitalization. Digitalization isn't talking about computers. It contains three main ideas: ease of manipulation, convergence, and instant speed.
For those of us that aren't familiar with those terms, could you explain exactly what they entail?
Of course, ease of manipulation is basically the extent to which data is easy to manipulate and to apply to different tasks. For example, one might be able to edit a photo, and now with more technology than ever, we are able to change the way photos and videos are presented to the viewer. Digital media also cultivates convergence. Just a few years ago, it was very difficult and expensive to have a voice-over internet phone call. Today, technology has improved immensely and we're able to have phone calls overseas. Instant speed covers how media is easily accessible to us. If you have a question, a quick Google search is right at your fingertips, and it only takes a fraction of a second.
But wait, do the ideas of gatekeeping and media hegemony still apply to social media? Or does digitalization and culture of social media change these ways of manipulation into something else?
Oh no, the four major theories still apply to social media just as much as they did to mass media. Major influencers like Ariana Grande practice gatekeeping by supporting different movements on their Instagram stories or posts. More recently, a major company, Patagonia, made posts on platforms like Instagram to encourage people to vote on environmental bills. This is a form of agenda setting.
What about cultivating worldviews? Does social media practice that too?
Yes, cultivating worldviews happens on social media just as much as it happens on mass media. One of the most prominent examples of this is increased awareness of our environment and appreciation for nature. To show this, I'd like to use a host to test something.
Go for it!
All right, close your eyes and leave your mind completely blank. Now I'm going to say a word and I want you to describe the first image that comes to mind. Okay, here's the word. Beautiful. Okay, now open your eyes. Molly, describe to me what you saw.
I saw a mountain with snow-covered pine trees and like the sun in the distance.
Interesting. And Evan, what did you see?
I saw a majestic waterfall in the forest with a ton of deer.
This is interesting because when we look at a Google search for the word beautiful, all pictures are of attractive women. Why do you think we see these pictures instead of nature?
Is it because we're shown an increased number of nature images on places like Instagram that are described as beautiful?
I do see a lot of posts from people traveling to pretty mountains or beaches and saying things like, "This is the most beautiful place on earth," or something like that.
Exactly. Social media has cultivated our world views to change our perception of the word beautiful. This isn't the only example, but is one of the most prominent.
Wow, it's crazy to see just how much social media comes into play in our perceptions.
Isn't it? Let's talk about another social media influence. I'm sure we are all aware that most celebrities here in the US have a huge control over the social media that we consume, and that these celebrities are extremely wealthy. Ideological influence comes into play in social media through these celebrities, individuals, and groups that already benefit from the existing social structure. They're more likely to describe and promote their own values and perspectives of a wealthy life rather than to describe individuals and working class people.
Thank you, Tatum. That was very eye-opening on how social media can influence us. This information is especially shocking when you realize how much we use social media on a daily basis.
It's almost a scary thought. I'm not entirely sure how to feel about it.
To show you just how scary it is, the team here at Bronco Newz tracked our social media usage for 2 weeks. This data we compiled was actually quite interesting.
According to the data, on average, Ryan uses social media 7.5 hours a week. Tatum is on it 24 hours. Molly 15, Grace 25, and I'm on social media 25.2 hours a week. These are scary numbers because when you think about it, all of us on average spend almost a day's worth on social media a week.
An entire day?
In some cases, more than that.
So does that mean 52 days out of my year are on social media?
Exactly.
No, that's insane. We're wasting so much of our time on this little app on our phone.
And think about this. In 5 years, one of those years will be spent on social media.
That's it. I'm deleting all of my social media right now.
What? You don't like wasting your life away on social media? Anyways, I'm getting a report that Ryan has very important information to share with us about our generation's statistics. Ryan?
Thank you, Evan. Amelia Strickland, who has a master's degree in mental health counseling, wrote a paper titled Exploring the Effects of Social Media Use on the Mental Health of Young Adults. In it, she stated that 18 to 34-year-olds reported using social media an average of 3.8 hours per day, with 1 in 5 users stating that they are on social networking apps 6 or more hours a day. And remember that this was published in 2013. Advancements of technology and an increase in the ease of access to social media could only mean that this number has increased today.
Wow, the world is addicted. But one thing I'm still confused about is why all of us here at Bronco Newz have such different amounts of time that we use social media.
This has to do with why we each use social media. We all use it for different purposes: communication, entertainment, feeling a sense of belonging, and to share ideas and knowledge.
So, social media isn't just hours of scrolling through Instagram and TikTok. Some of us may use it for a variety of things throughout the day that cause us to spend more time on social media than others.
Exactly.
But even if these purposes are well-intentioned, people on social media still use manipulation tactics like agenda setting and gatekeeping to manipulate us.
True, even if you use Instagram just to talk with friends from high school you want to keep in touch with, influencers and media companies are still pounding you with information from their agendas in order to assert their beliefs and ideologies on you. And us consumers allow for this to happen through what Tatum talked about earlier, media hegemony.
Wow, the theories of media are everywhere.
Yes, Molly, we know.
Okay, now we go to Ryan Olson, who went out into the field to interview someone from our campus newspaper, The Arbiter. Ryan?
Thank you, Molly. I'm here at the Arbiter, where I'm going to ask Andrea Therese Martinez some questions. Let's go inside. Hello, Andrea.
Hello, Ryan.
The first thing I asked her was, could you start off with a brief introduction of The Arbiter? She told me that The Arbiter is a nonpartisan, hyper-local newspaper that aims to inform and connect its readers. Whether it's informing the campus about the news or connecting students with the resources that are available to them, The arbiter is on the job. Next, I asked her, how do you make sure that the messages you publish are easy to analyze and evaluate? She then informed me that the arbiter is in an idealized situation. They are funded by the university and they sell ads. They don't rely on people buying their paper. Because of this, they are able to avoid using something called the curiosity gap. This is what she had to say about it.
In other papers that I've worked for, there's something called the curiosity gap, which is essentially similar to clickbait. We're really lucky that in our headlines we can say, this person said this bill passes. We don't say, this bill, like THIS bill passed in the Senate. We can say, House Bill 392 passed in the Senate. Like, we can say what it is, we can say the story.
In other words, the arbiter doesn't have to be vague in order to lure in prey. Because they are funded by the university, they can put everything they need to in the headline. This makes it incredibly easy for the audience to understand their news, because the most important facts are in the headlines themselves. She also told me that the arbiter makes sure to write at an 8th grade level. And this is what she means by that.
It essentially means for people that maybe don't have the high school education, people that can't read like very wordy academic works, that the language is simplified and direct enough that everyone will be able to understand and no one will feel intimidated or like the news isn't for them. So for us, that's really important to make sure that we're not dumbing down information, we're just making sure people can access it and understand it even if they're skimming, even if they don't have time to analyze everything.
I moved on to ask her if she feels like mass media tries to be more engaging than accurate, and she said no. What she feels like is mass media tries to be more engaging than direct.
There are papers that their model, they do rely on the amount of seconds even that you spend. In an internship that I did, they gave me sort of a summary of how long people spend in my articles, like the average, like 3 minutes. And it's like the longer they spend on it reading, the more they're actually getting. And so they'll like put the punchline at the bottom per se. And so I think they're not necessarily sacrificing accuracy to make you like engage more, click more, stay on there more, but they're sacrificing that idea of being upfront.
Some other forms of not being upfront might also include the over-dramatization of news in order to make it seem more important. Andrea also went on to claim that she feels like this is a lot more of a national news outlet kind of thing, and not necessarily a local one. She ended her response to the question with this. She said, "Things do end up being swept under the rug when an outlet's number one goal is the number of people that click it." I then asked her the question, how does the arbiter find a balance between being engaging and accurate? She answered by saying that accuracy is the utmost important at the arbiter, and they try to write about news that they hope people will just care about, and she also relies on her editing team to make very visually appealing graphics. She stated that the arbiter doesn't want to try to trick people into reading their materials, unlike many other large media companies. They want you to care about the material and read it because you want to. Next, I asked, how do you make sure that your biases are limited in the text? She simply stated, fairness. She went on to explain how the arbiter always tries to report on both sides of the stories. For example, she said if they were going to do a story on an election, they would make sure to contact all of the candidates within the election and ask for a little excerpt that they could put into the paper, and this excerpt would be unedited as long as there were no cuss words. I was eager to find out how the arbiter decides what should be reported on. So I asked her, and this was her response.
It really is up to our reporters. Sometimes it's just walking around campus and hearing what students are talking about. Sometimes it's saying something on social media. Sometimes we get press releases or someone will reach out to us directly and say, hey, like our department is doing this. But in terms of what gets covered, it really, like once again, comes down to what we think will serve our readers best.
She then moved on to say that the only time she ever turns down a story is when she feels like there is not enough information on the subject to write about, or if there is a source that they are unable to confirm. I continued with the question, how do you choose your cover? And she told me that the arbiter is different. They choose what story will be on the cover of their paper first, and then they will figure out what stories can be used to complement it, but also what stories can be used to add variety. Now, Andrea has had an internship at the Idaho Statesman, and she told me that at the Idaho Statesman and other large news sources is they have editors who look at all of the stories all at once, and then they choose, even sometimes the same day, what story will be on the very cover of the paper. Knowing how the Arbiter picks their cover, I was intrigued in knowing how they organize the rest of their paper. I assumed that they would organize it in a way that it would go from most important to least important, but Andrea told me that this was not the case. And actually, they always organize it the same. It goes news, opinions, the feature, culture, and then sports. She said that this is just an easy way for their audience to flip to the exact page that they always want every time. Within these sections, she said that they organize the stories by what looks the most visually appealing, not necessarily what is most important. I was also curious how the Arbiter combated cultivation theory, the idea that mass media portrays a worldview that is inaccurate. An example of an inaccurate worldview is how the news will stereotypically make the world seem a lot more violent and dangerous than it actually is. She told me that they combat this by utilizing something called solutions journalism.
About at a conference is something called solutions journalism, where we will write about the climate crisis and how it's harming people and animals and nature, but every once in a while we try to have a story. Our staff writer Ella just wrote one about sustainability, and it's literally just really small steps that students can take. Like, what are small things students can do in their everyday life to help it? So rather than just saying like we're all gonna die and the world is being destroyed, we say like this is what it looks like now, this is how we can improve it. So we try to practice solutions journalism, which the definition really is looking at solutions that maybe other states, countries have implemented and say how can we bring that here. So we hope that helps with like the negativity aspect.
Lastly, I asked her, in this mass media age, how do you think that we can become more effective consumers of media? Here is her unedited response.
I would say diversify where you get your news from. Like, obviously, I want to say like read the Arbiter, but it is true that every single outlet is going to present a story differently, and it's okay to have that bias. But I think sticking out of your bubble, because even on social media, you're going to have the algorithm that only gives you things that you would want to see, and so really getting out of that bubble, seeing how other places portray news and what sources they have and what they've heard, I think is really important. And also reading the whole story. I know I just said some people don't have time, but actually going through and reading and engaging, because some people say they should, why didn't they write this story? They should write this, and then that they leave it there. But then we have some people that email us and say, hey, I heard this is happening, you should write about it. A story that our news editor, Bryden, is working on, it's because a student was like, I heard this happened, I think people should know. And we were like, absolutely. And so they helped us through that process of getting in touch with people. And I think a way to be a consumer of media is also to be a sharer of media and know what to share, and whether it's somebody else's work or your own that you're putting out there.
In the end, I was shocked to find out just how much the Arbiter has our back. They are trying everything in their power to just inform and connect us, as fair and as unbiased as possible. They are a great example that not every news source is out to trick you and steal your time. A special thanks to the Arbiter for taking time out of their day to talk to me, and now I'm going to send it back to Molly. So Molly, back to you.
Wow, I'm so glad the Arbiter cares so much about media literacy. Thank you for your time, Ryan.
Thank you everyone for tuning in to another episode of Bronco News. We appreciate your continuous support.
As always, if you have any questions or things you would like to discuss, feel free to direct message us on Instagram. You can find us at Bronco News, and that's Bronco News with a Z.
And if it's more convenient, feel free to text or call our office at 707-815-4435. No, seriously, everybody, if you have any questions or things you want to discuss, contact us right now. Contact us right now.